I was having this conversation with a student recently, and one of the big divides in martial arts teaching is kind of whether or not you sit there and really kind of like perfect a technique or a small set of techniques before you move on to the next one, or you just kind of front load a lot of stuff and you progressively work on them as the students go. And now I fall in the camp of the latter. I absolutely do not see any significant benefit in the perfect one move at a time camp. I really don't. I feel like what that ends up doing is stunting the students' growth. And when we know that the majority of students are not going to go and be competitive fighters, we know that they're training, for recreation or for self-defense. The fact that an altercation in the real world could happen, the moment they walk out of your class, the day before they start your class, 10 years later, 20 years later, or never, right? The fact that we don't actually know when altercations can happen, I personally feel that it is much better to give them a lot of tools and a lot of kind of play and development time right up front, and just progressively make everything sharper and higher quality as they go. Especially when you consider that even in professional fighting, that most of the time what people would consider crappy technique tends to be what ends up winning. Then I feel like sitting there and perfecting each and every technique before you move on to the next thing is unnecessarily restrictive and far too slow. Now, it does come with the downside, right, of students end up sloppier than they could be and should be, and some students never progressing never get better. It just ends up being the way it is. I mean, we already know that 80% of people who try martial arts wash out, within the first year. So that being the case, right, most people are not going to have a lot of high quality tools. But in my opinion, I would rather somebody who washes out after a month, 3 months, 6 months, I would rather them walk away saying, I still kind of more or less know how to throw a few punches and, how to block and hit back. I would rather them say that rather than, well, I've got this one really good trick that I know, but I don't know anything else. So that brings up one of the ways to analogize this, I guess, is using kind of like the progression of video game resolutions. And so you can just call this like the progressive resolution teaching method. I don't have another term for it, and this isn't going to stick. I'm not going to remember this. But, right, if you look at the progression of video game consoles, let's go back to the Nintendo. Everybody knows the Nintendo, even if you weren't around when it was around. Everybody knows the legends of it, right? Because it was like the big thing. Well, it was an 8-bit console, right? So you had very obvious pixels, things were extremely low resolution, and yet you could get enough out of it that it was enjoyable to play. You could tell things from other things. It was serviceable if low resolution, and you could tell kind of things being different from one another, if not always clearly. That's where students are going to start, whether or not you intend to start a student and work them one technique at a time and developing it to perfection. What you're going to do is they're going to start with kind of crappy technique anyway, and over time, so no matter what, you can't get away from this kind of progressive thing. The question is, do you do an entire toolbox at a time, or do you do one or two tools at a time? Then, of course, next thing you get is the 16-bit, right? Super Nintendo, right? And all of a sudden, things are a lot more clear, right? The pixels are still obvious, but things look even more clear. They look higher resolution, right? There are more pixels per square inch, and you get a lot more definition of things, looking good. But it's still kind of grainy and low resolution. But at this point, it's not only serviceable, but it actually looks pretty good. Then you get up to 32-bit, right? And this is when you started seeing like the 3D systems, right? The Sega Saturn and the original PlayStation and whatnot. Now, granted, when people moved to that, going into the three-dimensional polygons, things got kind of really low resolution again because they were moving into kind of a different era of graphics processing. But if you look at some of the two-dimensional games that came out for that era of gaming systems, man, they looked really sharp. They looked really, really, really solid because you were able to jam that much more information into every square inch of screen. That you ended up with some really, really sharp looking stuff. And so what, like say, some of the King of Fighters games and stuff had some really, really good resolution during this era, and things looked really sharp, really nice, despite, still being kind of low res. And you get to the 64-bit era, and now, technically speaking, a lot of the game systems that are out now are still using 64-bit CPUs, but they have additional processing power and other systems, right? Things have gotten different. And I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know exactly how they're different. I just know that they are different. And then for a little while, like the PlayStation 2 was 128-bit, right? And you could have this just like this incredible resolution, at least for the time, because the processing power was so much so that you could just jam that much information into every little parcel, packet, whatever, to make the gameplay smoother. And then of course, right after that, people kind of stopped participating in the whole bit wars, and now you just have like HD and Ultra HD for stuff. But the bigger point of this is that I think it is important to think of it. I think it's kind of important to think of it this way, in that not only did the resolution get bigger, but the capacity for the games to be bigger got bigger. And right, so like you end up also with this kind of growing progression as well. And so the idea is, if you give somebody a low resolution functional toolkit, that means that now they have information that they can pin other information to, right? We assimilate information much better when it is similar to something we already know, because if we've already accepted something as being true, establishing that something else is true because it is attached to something else that is true makes it easier. Now, it doesn't always work out, right? But the point is that generally speaking, attaching new information to old information makes things stick better. So you give somebody a functional basic toolkit that's fairly low resolution, but that they can work with and that they can play with, means that when it's time for them to move up to the next bit, they can handle not only sharpening up those tools, but also adding a few more. And then same thing as you go down the line, to the point where now things can be just absolutely massive and really, really, really sharp. Now, granted, there's going to come a time where you run out of techniques, and you should run out of techniques. I mean, there's just not that many ways to throw a punch. There's not that many ways to throw a kick or a lock or a takedown or a pin or a control position. There's only so many ways you can do that stuff. And most of what ends up coming out as new is just variations on an old theme. But the point is that when you have this progressive method, what you have done is you've created this kind of nucleus of what you can call like your core set of techniques and tactics and just core ethos that you can then use as an expansion system, right? Piggybacking the new stuff off of the old stuff. And it helps the students develop in a more complete, a more thorough way, and in my opinion, a faster way, rather than, every time you do a technique starting here, then moving up through, and then you go to another technique and you start back here again, right? If you do that way, where you build up each technique into high definition one at a time, when the student gets a new technique and they're frustrated because it's brand new and doesn't attach to anything else, they're going to get frustrated all over again. It slows the process way down. I just don't see any benefit to it. So anyway, this is a way to think about the teaching method, right? good core skill set, your basic boxing punches, like, 7 basic kicks, top 10 throws, top 10 submissions, basic stuff like that. Build a basic toolkit, right? Your home gamer toolkit, and then work on expanding it out and making those things high quality, right? As the low quality things kind of, deteriorate, replace them with higher quality things. And that's the progression of this. All right, I've talked on that enough, and I'll talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Share this with your friends or anybody else who might be interested in this kind of content. If you happen to be in the Metro Phoenix area, come in for a class or just stop in to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Definitely check out our socials and our website that has all of our contact information and all of the other relevant information. And more than anything, check out our Substack. Our Substack will be containing all of the links that we use to cite and reference in our videos, as well as exclusive training content that will be available for premium members. Memberships are cheap, but you can also sign up for free, and we do have articles for free, and we will have more free articles available for you. It is a fantastic platform for what we're doing here, and we hope to see you over there. So I will talk to you guys later, and look out for the next one. Good journey.